Okay, thank you. I changed the title of my talk, so it's now Question on Notation for Interactive System. It's basically you take all the talk this morning and you compress them in 10 minutes, and you have... Basically, I feel that everything I want to say has already been said. So just to give some context, the type of things we are doing is we construct objects and interfaces for music expression. It's not very recent, but just to give a few examples. Okay, I stop here. This video is on YouTube, and there is one comment I really like. It's this one. I have absolutely no idea of what I just saw. And of course, when you just see and then you don't experience yourself, it's very difficult to understand what's going on. And you can feel about notation also as explanation and to describe what's happening, actually. And really, first question is actually what to notate, and not really how to notate, but really what to notate. So sound, of course. I want to describe sound, but in a talk I gave some years ago, someone argued with me saying that what I was showing was it was not a new instrument because the sound was just samples and the sound were not new. And I was arguing that because we try to create instrument with using movement and body, and then you can create new movement, then it's also kind of a new instrument. And of course, it's really the interaction between sound and movement we want. That's important, so we need to notate the interaction. One example from dance, Richard Siegel, a choreographer I really like, previously with Foresight. That's an example where actually he notates dance in a very logical way, instruction like coding. If you do that, then. And so I'm not going to talk about that at all, but what we try to use in our system is develop the idea of playing techniques, affordances, and metaphors. So we already heard about all that this morning. Playing techniques. So playing techniques is really basically from acoustic instrument. Here, one example, pizzicato. Actually, the instruction is a movement, an action. But of course, a pizzicato, it's both the action and the sound. If you do only the action without the sound, it's not a pizzicato. And if you hear the sound, but the motion is different, and it's not really a pizzicato neither. So it's really the combination of both. Of course, it works well with acoustic instrument because you need only to specify the action. Usually, it's sufficient. Now, when you create new interfaces in the digital domains, you can imagine playing techniques like we made an installation with ball, so different way to manipulate the ball. But of course, that doesn't specify the sound, and you couldn't guess from the previous chart the sound was going to be played. And all this thing is using all these playing techniques way to use the motion. How to notate both sound and motion. So there is this notion of affordances I want to apply to both the motion and the sound. And I think that's a perfect notation. You see the object, you guess the action you have to do, and you hear in your head the sound, right? And there is even more indication on the box about what the sound is going to be played. So I'm not going to play it. When you see that, you imagine the action or some possible action. Okay, when you hear that, you imagine some motion. And now, combining these two, that could be a kind of a new notation. You can get this. Of course, so it's transforming actually probably the motion that you were imagining is not exactly, it's not the motion of playing guitar neither, but it's a combination. So it's creating a new affordances for this object. When I see that, I always directly get what to do and the sound. So it's actually somehow really talking about action sound metaphors. And just to give some example, we made an installation 2 years ago where the idea was that you have to imitate the motion of somebody. And it's not only the motion, but also the sound made by vocalization. To go very fast is we have a system where you can play a movement and make a sound. So if so now the computer record all that, make a model, and then you can really play with the motion only. And if you redo the motion correctly, that's kind of reproduce the sound. Okay. So how to notate that? And since it was for installation, we thought that we need to give some instruction for the people to use the system. And with my colleague Ricardo, we invented cards. Actually, they are here if you want to see. So imagine that we are actually giving cards to the people, so they have to do a motion and make a sound with their voice. So it's between metaphors and affordances. I think some of these are clear, or some of these are less clear. But actually it worked very well, because we were giving the card to the people, they were actually able to make a sound and a motion quite fast. So at the end it was like that. We have the card, you distribute the card, and then you use the system. So just to finish, what's important also in thinking about interaction is collective interaction, and that's a whole new problem about notation. Here it's the work of my colleague Norbert Schnell in the Cosima project using mobile phones, where here there are some representation on the ground that give you some type of notation of what's going on. I don't have time to really explain. Of course, if people are in a space and freely moving, how to notate the possible interaction, because it's not only the motion, it's also the interaction between the people. And to finish, that's a video from a concert with audience participation. You have a mobile phone, you can make motion. That's adding sound to the concert, and all the instruction is on the mobile phone. So you understand what you have to do. You see all the mobile phone. And it's a bit fuzzy, but if you can understand French, it's written listening. And my last question is, which is very important for interactive system, is that we actually to instruct people to listen and stop moving. So can we notate listening and notate silence? So I stop. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Frédéric. Do we have any questions?
Yes. More of a comment, especially your last question, notate listening. And I go back to thinking about the free improvisers, because I think people are, when they try and analyze what is being done, or who's playing what and how, I think that's often what we do. We try and notate or explain listening So it's just interesting, and I think the card game, I just want to say, was a nice mix between sort of a cobra and a stripsody, Cather Barbarian and John Zorn's kind of gestures there. So, nice.
Yeah, I mean, I was very happy when you talk about listening in your talk, because I think that's actually something very important.
Thanks a lot. What about multiple affordances? Like, you have objects which are obvious, but then what happens? And what's the potential opening up there for experimentation, exploration? Like, does it play into your research, or?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, actually, when I'm using affordances in a very non very rigorous way. I mean, there are actually there is this debate between different people about what really affordances. So I'm taking more of course, affordances, there is the perception, but also you at the end you learn how to use the object, and there are definitely different affordances, and then we try to talk about sound affordances. What kind of movement you are actually engaged or invited to do when you listen. So it's going back to the listening question. I don't know if that's answering your question.
Yeah, absolutely. But I have a follow-up. Like, you talk about sound affordances, but then it comes back to your debate years ago with the sound. So yeah, it's samples which are predefined. So how do you define sound affordance there? Like, I can see the affordance for gesture in relation to an object, but the sound, when we're not talking about material sound, about sounds to me a bit more dodgy. Like, or how do you?
Well, I'm saying there is no deterministic way, but thinking if you listening to some sound or music, thinking, okay, what kind of motion should I do to go with that? I mean, this is an interesting exercise. So there are obvious sound where if you recognize the action, it's very obvious. If the sound has very clear morphology, then you can imagine something. And some others, it's not well defined. I totally agree. But the exercise is very interesting, and that's actually one way. That's one design approach we use for interactive system. So you take some sound and you imagine the action.
Okay, I just want to conclude to speak with you later on 2 points. One is metaphor, because I also use metaphor for the gesture, and the question of representation, because, for example, bzz, in my notation is seagull, there is a mention of seagull just on the tree, and the other is about collective interpretation. I think it's linked to the experience of Forsyth with his dancers, and we can speak about that later. Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Claudia, did you have a final remark?
No.
Okay, good. So